Okay, so let's take a look at the examples for Lesson 15 of Unit 2. Lesson 15 of Unit 2, this is actually the last lesson of the first half of Unit 2. There will be a mid-unit test and an end-of-unit test. So this lesson represents the last lesson of the first half. So for number 1, consider the polynomial f of x equals x to the fourth minus ux cubed, that is not a typo, plus 24x squared minus 32x plus 16. If x minus 2 is a factor of f of x, find the value of u. So a couple of things here. Okay. X minus 2 is a factor. That is an important piece of information. Now, it says it in the lesson notes today, but we should actually know this already from the past. We look right here, okay? If x minus a number, in this case x minus 2, is a factor of the polynomial, the following is true, okay? If I switch the minus to plus, that number is an x-intercept, okay? So we know from the past that if x minus 2 is a factor, then we know that 2 is an x-intercept. Okay? We know that 2 is an x-intercept. Now, why is that important? Remember, x-intercepts are also known as zeros. So because 2 is an x-intercept, then this second thing here is also important. The y value at x minus, the y value at x equals, in this case, 2, is 0. So what that means is that if I plug in 2, okay, so the y value at x equals 2 is 0. So that means if I take this polynomial here, if I plug in 2, because it's an x-intercept, if I plug in 2, I should get an answer of 0. Okay? Now, if I know that, then that means I can figure out what u is. Okay? Because that is the ultimate goal of this question, find the value of u. So because the y value at 2 is 0, that means I can take the polynomial, and what I'm going to do is, let me write out the polynomial first. Minus u x cubed plus 24x squared minus 32x plus 16. Okay. If I plug in 2 for x, I should get an answer of 0. So that's going to look like this. So I'm going to take all of the x's, and I'm going to replace all the x's with 2's. Okay. So I'm using different colors here for those of you that are visual learners. Yeah. Okay. All right. So notice I replaced all of the x's with 2's. All right. Now I'm going to essentially, so if I do that, I know that the answer is going to be 0. So let me give myself a little more room here. All right, so I know that the answer is 0 because the y value is 0. So because I can now simplify this and now use that to solve, to figure out what the value of u is. So let's do that. So 2 to the power of 4. If you don't know that, 2 to the power of 4 means 2 multiplied by itself 4 times. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. Okay, so 16 minus, minus u times 2 cubed. 2 cubed is going to be 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Okay. Plus 24 times 2 squared, which is 4, minus 32 times 2. 32 times 2 is 64 plus 16. And I'm going to keep simplifying here. So I have 16 minus u times 8. Now, here's what I'm going to do here. Notice I'm going to change around the order just to make it a little easier. So I'm going to make that a minus 8u. Then I have plus 24 times 4. So that's 96 minus 64 plus 16. Okay. Whoops. All right. Now I can take all of these constant terms, this, 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 and this, and I can combine all of those. So 16 and 96 and negative 64 and 16. So again, 16 plus 96 plus negative 64 plus 16, and I get 64. So if all those terms that I circled, I just put that in my calculator. 16 plus 96 plus negative 64 plus 16, and I got 64. So 64 minus 8u equals 0. So I'm dropping this down here. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to subtract 64 from both sides, and I'm starting to run out of room here. Okay. So I have negative 8u equals 0 minus 64. So negative 8u equals negative 64. And then I'm going to finish it off by dividing both sides by 8. So I have to do negative 64 divided by negative 8, and I get u equals 8. And that right here is the answer to the question. The key with this is that we knew that x minus 2 is a factor. If x minus 2 is a factor, therefore we know that positive 2 is an x-intercept. And if positive 2 is an x-intercept, that means the y value at x equals 2 is 0. So I was able to plug in 2 for x and then basically set it equal to 0 in order to find the value of u. This particular question, number 1 here, you will not see a similar question you won't see this question on your cool down tonight, but there will be a question just like number 1. This will be on your test, your mid-unit test. And obviously not this exact question, but there will be a very similar question to this on your test on this unit. So it's really important that you have this example written down, even though it's not going to be on the cool down tonight. Example 2 is very similar to what you'll see on your cool down tonight. So let's take a look at example 2. Consider the polynomial f of x. Consider the polynomial f of x equals x cubed minus 2x squared minus 5x plus 6 if 1 is one of the x-intercepts of f of x. Find the two factors of f of x and rewrite it in factored form. Okay. So this is in our lesson notes. Okay. This is in our lesson notes. It's also something we've learned before. Again, if I look up here, whoops, okay, in this case, I know that the number 1 is an x-intercept. So if 1 is an x-intercept, then I automatically know that one of its factors is x minus 1. So let me write that down here because it's important to realize. Okay, 1 is an x-intercept. Okay, we automatically know if I switch the sign that x minus 1 is a factor. So I know that x minus 1 is a factor. Okay. So I already found one of the factors, x minus 1. Now I need to find the second factor. All right. Now to find the second factor, I'm going to do exactly what I did yesterday. So I know that the polynomial is x cubed minus 2x squared minus 5x plus 6. I know that that is the polynomial. I know that x minus 1 is a factor. So to find the other factor, I'm going to simply divide. Okay. So let's set up the division here, the box method. So x minus 1, and this is going to be x cubed. All right, so x times x squared is x cubed. Negative 1 times x squared is going to be negative 1x squared. Okay, so then I look here. I need to have negative 2x squared. So in order to make that happen, I need to have negative 1x squared here. Negative 1 and negative 1x squared becomes negative 2x squared. For the next column, x times what is negative 1x squared? It's going to be x times negative 1x, right? X times negative 1x is negative 1x squared. And negative 1 times negative x is going to be positive 1x. So I have positive 1x, okay? I need to make it so that I have negative 5x. So that means I need to put a negative 6x here. Why negative 6x? Because negative 6x and positive 1x becomes negative 5x. Okay. And then to finish it off, x times what is negative 6x? Well, it'll be x times negative 6, right? X times negative 6 is negative 6x. And then down here, negative 1 times negative 6 is 6. And you can see we're done. In this case, there's no remainder because we have the correct constant term. So the first factor was x minus 1. Our second factor is x squared minus x minus 6. So find the two factors of f of x. The two factors are x minus 1 and x squared minus x minus 6. Okay, those are the two factors. The second part of the question says rewrite it in factored form. So the factored form is just going to be x minus 1 and x squared minus x minus 6. That right here, that is the factored form. Okay, again, to recap, this was the first factor. Okay, we automatically knew x minus 1 was a factor because 1 is an x-intercept. We divided to find the second factor, x squared minus x minus 6. And we put that together to form the factored form. So number 2 here, what I just did on number 2, there you will see a very similar problem. You will see a very similar problem on your cool down. So for example, if I said, for example, negative 2 is an x-intercept, then that would mean x plus 2 is a factor. Remember, we do that sign switch. If 5 is an x-intercept, then x minus 5 is a factor. If -7 is an x-intercept, then x plus 7 is a factor. Okay? That is it for lesson 15.